On a cold night in Granada, a hungry girl with a battered guitar meets a kind waiter in a small restaurant. Her beautiful voice silences the crowd, but an angry man shouts at her to get out of the restaurant. After ending up on the streets, she faces a scary and arduous journey to find a new life. Before we dive into the video, be sure to subscribe to the channel to make sure you never miss any emotional and heartwarming stories like this. It was a frigid winter night in Granada, a city whose narrow, winding streets glimmered under old street lamps. The faint smell of roasted chestnuts wafted from corner stalls, while an undercurrent of soft music echoed in the distance. Amid this nocturnal tapestry stood Las Estrellas del Alba, a centuries-old restaurant with rugged stone walls and welcoming lanterns that spilled gold light onto the cobblestones outside. Inside, the chatter of diners and the clinking of cutlery filled the warm interior. Vases of fresh flowers dotted the tables, and Spanish guitar music from a small overhead speaker blended with the murmur of conversation. Despite the cozy glow, Tomas, one of the waiters, could hardly shake the weariness settling into his bones. He had just completed a double shift, something he'd been doing more frequently since the restaurant owner, Señor Felipe, had been tightening up schedules and demanding more hours from the staff. But on this night, Felipe was notably absent, giving everyone a rare reprieve from his stern presence. Tomas, a lanky young man with tired eyes, collected the last stack of plates from a nearby table. He forced a polite smile at a group of customers and headed through the bustling kitchen, where pots rattled and orders were hastily called out. His only thought was to toss the garbage, then return home and collapse into bed. Outside, the biting cold stung his cheeks as he slid open the heavy alley door. A gust of frosty air rushed in, causing him to shudder. Something else gave him pause, a gentle strain of guitar carried on the wind. Frowning, Tomas let his gaze drift to the corner of the alley. There, in the faint glow of a flickering street lamp, a little girl, no older than 10, sat huddled on the ground, wearing a threadbare coat and battered shoes. Clutched in her tiny hands was a guitar that looked as though it had been through countless storms. Its wood was chipped, a couple of the strings were nearly rusted, and the neck carried deep scratches. Her large brown eyes, shimmering with a combination of hope and wariness, met his. "Hey, Aldo de Comer?" she whispered, her voice fragile as a breeze brushing across frozen leaves. The question stunned him. He was well aware of how Señor Felipe would react if he learned that a street child had approached one of his employees for food. Yet Tomas could not tear himself away from the girl's gaze, which carried echoes of desperation and determination. He swallowed hard. "I'm not sure," he managed, placing the garbage bag aside. Something about her posture, her trembling hands, the way she tried to hide the guitar behind her small frame, prompted compassion in him. He quickly scanned the alley to see if anyone was watching or if any of the other staff were around. They were alone. Finally, he softened. "But if you sing a song for the customers inside," he ventured, "I could get you a plate. My name's Tomas." The little girl nodded shyly. "I'm Lucia," she replied. Her timid smile hinted at gratitude, though her eyes still flickered with caution, as if she expected to be sent away. Tomas ushered her in quietly through the back door, guiding her to a discreet corner of the dining area. The air smelled of saffron and simmering tomatoes, and the muted glow of antique lamps highlighted the old stone arches of the restaurant's interior. Most patrons were busy finishing their meals or chatting over glasses of wine. Hoping not to draw attention, Tomas cleared a small space where she could sit. "Go ahead," he encouraged, motioning to the guitar. Lucia inhaled a shaky breath, then began to pluck the battered strings. The music started softly, a gentle, haunting melody that seemed to float above the bustle of table talk. Little by little, the hum of conversation waned. By the time Lucia's voice joined the guitar, the entire restaurant had fallen silent. Her singing was captivating, filled with raw emotion and a resonance that belied her age. For a few precious minutes, the only sounds were Lucia's gentle strumming and her voice weaving a tapestry of longing and wonder through the old arches of Las Estrellas del Alba. When the final note evaporated into the hush, a wave of applause rippled through the dining room, followed by hushed whispers of amazement. Several diners stood to place coins near her feet, creating a gleaming little pile of generosity on the worn tiles. Lucia blinked, wide-eyed, overwhelmed by the reaction. Tomas approached with a steaming plate of pesto and bread. "Eat slowly, Vale?" he whispered. He had to stifle a laugh when she pounced on the plate, though his chest tightened at the thought that she was likely starving. But the moment of wonder was cut short by a sudden commanding voice slicing through the air. "What is going on here?" The applause died instantly. Heads swiveled to see a tall figure at the entrance, the same man whose absence had softened the night for the staff. Senor Felipe had arrived. A hush gripped the restaurant. Senor Felipe glared, his shoulders rigid under a tailored jacket. This was the man who prided himself on upscale service and a refined image. He marched forward, his footsteps reverberating against the tiled floor. His dark eyes flicked from Tomas to Lucia, whose tiny form cowered near her guitar. "Tomas, ¿qué significa esto?" Felipe barked, voice taut with anger. "Who permitted this street performance?" He gestured sharply at Lucia, and for an instant, Tomas thought the man would rip the guitar from her hands. Summoning courage, Tomas stood between them, holding up his hands to placate the furious owner. "Senor Felipe, she was hungry. She was performing outside, and the customers enjoyed her music so much they—" "You think this is a carnival sideshow?" Felipe snapped. "We run a serious establishment. People come here for elegance, not street acts." Lucia looked ready to bolt, her small hand clenched around the guitar's neck like a shield. A lady seated nearby, a longtime patron named Dona Carlotta, cleared her throat. "Pardon, Senor Felipe, but that girl's voice was extraordinary. She touched everyone here," she asserted. Several nearby diners nodded emphatically. "Isn't it worth something that she brought a lovely atmosphere to our evening?" Felipe's face twitched with suppressed rage. He frowned at the cluster of nodding customers, clearly uncomfortable at being challenged. For a moment, it seemed his indignation might be subdued by the approval swirling around him. But then he squared his shoulders. "Not in my restaurant," he said curtly. "And I don't want beggars inside these walls." He fixed his gaze on Lucia. "Get out," he said. "I won't tolerate this." Lucia flinched, her mouth trembling as she rose to her feet. Her guitar nearly slipped from her grasp. It was evident she was torn between the relief of having eaten and the realization she was once again without shelter. Yet before she could slip away into the cold, Tomas intercepted her. "She's only a child," Tomas pleaded. "If you must punish someone, let it be me. I let her come in." Felipe let out a derisive laugh. "Don't think I won't. Pack your things, Tomas, you're fired." Gasps scattered among the diners. Lucia whipped around, eyes large. "Please," she spoke up, voice trembling. "He was trying to help me. Don't punish him." Felipe's lip curled. "This is not the place for sentimental displays. We don't run a charity." Tomas felt his stomach drop. He needed this job. He thought of the rent due in a few days. But amid the flurry of emotions, another customer stepped forward, a well-dressed man with a casual but confident air. His name, as he introduced himself, was Daniel Quiroga, and he had been watching Lucia the entire night with curious intensity. "Senor Felipe, my name is Daniel Quiroga. I'm a music producer, and I believe we have an opportunity here." The entire restaurant stilled, every head turning toward them, as if collectively bracing for what might unfold. Felipe bristled, crossing his arms. "An opportunity? For my restaurant or for you?" "For all of us," Daniel said. "This girl, Lucia, has something special, a talent that can draw people in. I'm suggesting a partnership that benefits your establishment as well as her future." While he spoke, Lucia trembled at the edge of the group, looking uncertainly from one adult to another. Tomas sensed she was just as wary of grand offers as she was of returning to the cold streets. Felipe narrowed his eyes, trying to project authority. "We're not turning Las Estrellas del Alba into a busking corner," he snorted. "I'm not sure I trust your motives, Senor Quiroga." Daniel took the skepticism in stride. "I've witnessed raw talent, and I'm telling you, This girl's voice can make memories for your customers. Imagine designating one night a week for new, young artists, led by Lucia's performance. People will talk, more clients will come, and your restaurant gains a unique reputation. Tomas felt a wave of hope. He shot a glance at Lucia, who was clinging to her guitar, still trying to process the idea of performing regularly somewhere she'd nearly been chased out. Felipe tapped his chin, torn between his pride and the collective stares of customers who were clearly on Lucia's side. Finally, with a dismissive wave of his hand, he muttered, "Fine. One night. But if it doesn't work, we do away with it, and Tomas will remain fired." Tomas's heart jumped. Before he could argue further, Daniel quickly intervened. "It can start as a single special event. Afterward, you can decide." Felipe just grunted, as if wanting to be rid of the entire matter. "Make your arrangements. I expect everything in perfect order," he said, turning away. He paused briefly to glare at Lucia, then strode out of the restaurant, the tap of his shoes echoing in the now quiet dining room. Relief spread across Tomas's face, mirrored in Lucia's. The diners exchanged murmurs, a few clapped politely, and Dona Carlotta gave Lucia a small thumbs up. Daniel stepped closer, offering a sympathetic smile to the girl. "You sang beautifully tonight. That's something worth nurturing." Lucia nodded, hugging her guitar. "Gracias," she whispered. She cast a worried glance at Tomas. "Will I still be able to eat?" Tomas let out a short laugh, tension draining from his posture. "Let's get you a warm meal and figure out what happens next." News of Lucia's upcoming performance at Las Estrellas del Alba spread like wildfire through Granada's tight-knit neighborhoods. Word of mouth from curious customers, plus a few simple posters produced by Daniel Quiroga, ensured that when the special night arrived, the restaurant was packed to the rafters. Handwritten signs promised an evening of music by a remarkable young talent, stirring interest among locals and even a handful of out-of-town visitors. Inside the restaurant, there was a new energy. Strands of twinkling lights dangled from wooden beams, small table lamps flickered with warm amber glows, and the usual soft guitar from the speakers was muted so as not to overshadow the live performance. Señor Felipe, still holding firm to his persona, supervised the arrangement of chairs near a modestly raised platform along one wall. Tomas noticed the tension in Felipe's posture, a mixture of suspicion and grudging curiosity. Meanwhile, Lucia waited in a back corridor, nursing trembling hands and a fluttery stomach. She lightly strummed her newly tuned guitar, courtesy of Daniel, who had managed to replace a couple of its frayed strings. When Tomas slipped past with a tray of water glasses, he paused to check on her. "Nervous?" he asked softly. Her dark eyes darted up. "A little. But I still can't believe they're letting me sing. I've never been part of anything like this." She thought of the times she'd sung on street corners, hoping for coins just to get through another day. Tomas crouched beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Remember the first time you sang here? Everyone stopped to listen. That was just a taste of what you can do." Lucia mustered a small smile. Tomas, though not much older than her in spirit, felt like a big brother, someone on her side in a world that often slammed doors in her face. At precisely 8 o'clock, with the restaurant full and a small line forming outside, Felipe clinked a fork against a wine glass to hush the crowd. The chatter died down to whispers, and all eyes turned forward. "Bienvenidos," Felipe began in a clipped tone. "Tonight is a bit different. We have a new performer, and I trust you'll show her respect." He stepped aside, motioning to the corner stage. "Lucia, if you please." A smattering of applause followed, more out of curiosity than anything else. Lucia's heart pounded as she crossed the room. She tried not to trip on the edges of rugs or bump into any tables. A hush settled over the patrons, and somewhere in the crowd, Tomas offered her a reassuring nod. Daniel, dressed in a sleek suit, stood near the bar, arms folded but eyes gleaming with anticipation. Lucia swallowed. The hush felt thicker than the night air. Her callous fingers touched the worn frets, and she began to play a delicate introduction. The melody was soft yet brimming with an undercurrent of yearning. She closed her eyes, remembering the streets, the cold corners where she'd sought shelter, and the kindness Tomas had shown. All of it poured into the first lines of her song. The moment her voice emerged, warmth spread across the room. As if lighting a single candle in a dark chapel, her singing seemed to illuminate the restaurant. Customers leaned in, some with tears brimming, others sharing amazed smiles. The synergy between her guitar and voice was raw, as unrefined as it was irresistible. By the time Lucia finished, the entire audience was on its feet. A thunder of applause erupted, mingled with cheers and exclamations. "Bravo!" in Spanish, English, and other tongues. The fervor dazzled her. She stood breathless, blinking under the soft stage lights, hardly believing this was real. Felipe, usually unmoved by sentiment, blinked in astonishment before catching himself. He clapped slowly, a guarded look on his face. Clearly, he saw something big unfolding. Meanwhile, Daniel approached the stage, politely guiding Lucia to wave at the audience in gratitude. "Beautiful job," he murmured to her. "Now they see what I saw. This is just the start." Shy but glowing, Lucia retreated behind the curtains Tomas had fashioned from spare tablecloths. She inhaled deeply, exhaling in shaky triumph. In that moment, she felt seen. Behind the scenes, as the night's event continued with second helpings of food and excited chatter, Tomas spotted a woman entering the restaurant, slim figure, worn coat, hair tangled from the wind. There was something frantic in her eyes. She paused at the threshold, scanning the crowd. Then her gaze landed on Lucia as she finished speaking to a table of patrons who had showered her with compliments. "Lucia," the woman rasped, her voice catching. She took a trembling step forward. Lucia stiffened. A moment of pure shock rippled across her face. "Mama?" she whispered, voice shaky. The guitar nearly slipped from her hands as she darted to the woman. Every head in the bustling room seemed to swivel again, but the music overhead had resumed softly, and the hush wasn't as absolute as before. Still, those nearby could sense the gravity of the reunion. They watched as Lucia and her mother, Maria, hugged fiercely, tears slipping silently onto the restaurant's stone floor. "I've been looking everywhere," Maria said between sobs. I couldn't leave you, but I had no choice. We were in danger." Her words tumbled out, half explanation, half apology. Lucia trembled, her emotions swirling, uncertain what to say or feel. She had grown used to surviving alone, yet the memory of her mother's departure remained a raw wound. Tomas hovered protectively, ignoring Felipe's frantic gestures from across the room to keep things calm and unobtrusive. The hush thickened among the surrounding tables, despite the gentle guitar track overhead. "Let's step outside," Tomas suggested kindly. Daniel also approached, wanting to ensure Lucia was all right. In a quiet corner near the back door, Maria knelt so she was level with Lucia's eyes. "Mija, I never meant to abandon you. I had to run to protect you, and myself. I hoped I could come back for you. By the time I returned, you were gone." Lucia stared at her mother's face, so familiar but so worn by hardship. Tears slipped down the girl's cheeks, but she said nothing. She remembered nights spent alone on frigid streets, calling out for her mother in vain. And yet, seeing her mom in front of her, regret etched into every line of her face, dredged up a complex mix of sadness and relief. Finally, she managed. "I sang to survive. That's how I ended up here. Tomas, everyone, they helped me when you couldn't." Maria reached out to cup her daughter's cheeks, eyes brimming with remorse. "I'm here now," she whispered. "If you'll let me, I'll fix things for us. You can come home." At that, Daniel cleared his throat, stepping forward. "Maria, Lucia has begun a new chapter here. I'm actually a music producer, and I want to help her develop her talent. She's extraordinary." Maria, still on her knees, stared at the kindly-faced man in the suit. "Music producer? Is this real?" Lucia answered first. "He's helped me. And Tomas. And even—" she swallowed. "Well, Señor Felipe is letting me sing once a week now. People like my songs, Mama. Tomas placed a supportive hand on Lucia's shoulder. "We'd all like to keep her safe," he said to Maria. "And maybe let her keep singing if she wants to." Maria hesitated, tears once again welling in her exhausted eyes. "If that's what you want, Mhija, then I won't stand in the way." Señor Felipe was less thrilled about the drama unfolding in front of paying customers. Trying to maintain the restaurant's image, he insisted the reunion be taken off to the side. Nonetheless, Lucia's second performance that night carried even more emotion after her mother's arrival. Tomas watched from a distance, heart in his throat at the rawness in Lucia's songs. She poured her memories and fears into each lyric, leaving the customers spellbound once again. After closing time, the staff bustled about clearing plates and wiping down tables. Maria hovered protectively near Lucia, uncertain of her place in the restaurant's busy ecosystem. Daniel stood with a purposeful look, checking messages on his phone. Finally, he turned to the small family. "There's something I'd like you to consider," Daniel said, addressing both Maria and Lucia. "I'm organizing a small talent showcase in the city. It's not as formal as a festival, but there will be producers, sponsors, even a few journalists. It's an opportunity for you," he glanced at Lucia, "to share your voice beyond these walls. It could open doors." Lucia shot an anxious look at her mother, who answered slowly. "We have no place to stay. I'm afraid I can't give her the stability she needs, not yet." Tomas felt a pang of empathy. He'd been renting a cramped attic, scraping by since he started at Las Estrellas del Alba. He had no idea how to help Lucia find a secure living arrangement, yet he couldn't just ignore it. Thoughts churned in his head. Daniel pursed his lips. "Well," he said gently, "if you're both willing, I could rent a small room for you near my office. That way Lucia can rehearse safely. And if you decide you don't want to do the showcase, no problem." Maria's eyes brimmed with gratitude and a hint of doubt. "Why would you do that?" "Because," Daniel replied, "people helped me once when I had nothing. I can spot extraordinary potential, and Lucia has it. If she's interested, we'll take things one step at a time. If she decides not to pursue this, at least she'll have a roof over her head for now." Lucia clutched her guitar, mind reeling. She remembered the nights spent singing on corners for coins and rummaging for scraps of food. And she remembered the way her mother used to sing lullabies before everything fell apart. The idea of performing on a larger platform both thrilled and terrified her. She met Tomas's gaze, seeking reassurance. He nodded. "It's your choice, Lucia. But if I can give my opinion," he added, "I think you should go for it." Days turned into weeks. Maria and Lucia settled into a modest loft near the edge of Granada's historic center. It had peeling paint and a creaky wooden floor, but it was warm and had a small balcony overlooking a courtyard. Daniel helped them get basic furnishings, and he often stopped by in the afternoons to discuss music, show schedules, and potential next steps. For Lucia, life had transformed. She was no longer scavenging for meals, she was receiving invitations to sing. Still, her mother's sudden return tugged at her emotions. Late at night, she sometimes woke from dreams in which she was alone again on freezing streets. The uncertain flicker in her mother's eyes reminded her that they were both still healing. To help Lucia prepare for the upcoming showcase, Daniel brought in a local vocal coach, a patient woman named Rosa who taught her breathing exercises and stage presence. Initially, Lucia struggled to adapt, feeling out of place among instructions on posture and diction. She missed the rawness of performing purely by instinct, yet Rosa's guidance slowly revealed new depths in her voice. One crisp afternoon, Tomas visited them at the loft, carrying a small bag of pastries. "A treat from Las Estrellas del Alba," he announced with a playful grin. "Señor Felipe didn't exactly give his blessing, but he didn't stop me either." He placed the pastries on a wobbly table. Maria beamed at him. "Gracias, Tomas. I know I haven't had a chance to say it properly, but thank you for looking out for Lucia." Tomas rubbed the back of his neck, looking sheepish. "I'm just glad I could do something. She's become part of our family at the restaurant." Lucia, seated on a threadbare cushion by the balcony, ran her fingertips along her guitar strings. She shot Tomas a grateful look before quietly confessing, "Sometimes I miss the spontaneity of singing for people who just happen to be passing by. Now everything feels bigger." Tomas approached, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "That's normal. But never lose the part of you that sang simply because you had to, because it was your heart speaking. The rest is just extra." Their conversation was cut short when Daniel arrived with a folder of documents. "We need to go over the details for the showcase," he said, looking both excited and anxious. "There's a rumor that a major label scout might be there. This could be an even bigger deal than I thought." Lucia's eyes widened. She had barely adjusted to singing in a restaurant regularly, let alone a more professional setting. Yet part of her recognized that old spark, an urge to share what was in her heart through her voice, no matter how large the audience. If she could move one person, maybe she could move 1,000. She took a breath. "Let's do it," she said firmly. On the night of the talent showcase, the venue, an ornate old theater converted into a contemporary performance hall, buzzed with activity. Students lugged guitars, violinists tuned strings, dancers stretched in quiet corners. The smell of fresh paint mingled with the dusty aura of a building rich in history. Backstage, Lucia's hands trembled as she clutched her guitar case. Maria smoothed down the folds of Lucia's simple but clean dress. "It's going to be wonderful," she murmured, though her own voice shook with nerves. Daniel appeared, looking spiffy in a tailored blazer, phone in hand. "All right," he said. "I've confirmed you're third on the list. 2 acts will go before you. Just remember what Rosa taught you, and sing from your heart." Lucia nodded. She bit her lower lip, scanning the backstage corridor. In a moment of panic, she realized how many performers around her seemed older, more polished, with shiny instruments and custom outfits. She swallowed. The flashbacks of living on the street, rejected and alone, rushed through her mind. Could she really stand on that stage with them? Tomas, who had managed to slip into the backstage area with a volunteer pass, caught her hesitation. He strode over and squeezed her shoulder. "You have every right to be here," he said simply. "When you step on that stage, just remember the day you sang in Las Estrellas del Alba for a plate of food. It's the same voice. The same Lucia." Her gaze flicked up, meeting his warm eyes. She exhaled a shaky breath. "Thank you," she whispered. The first 2 acts went by in a blur. A flamenco guitarist whose fingers danced across the strings, and a pop singer whose energetic number got a solid round of applause. Then the MC announced, "Please welcome our next performer, Lucia Alvarez." Lucia's legs wobbled with each step toward the spotlight. She felt the hush from the audience pressing in like a gentle wave. The thick red curtains parted, revealing a sea of faces. Yet the warmth of the footlights also reminded her of the soft lanterns at Las Estrellas del Alba. With that comforting thought, she strummed the first chord. She had chosen an original piece, one she'd composed late at night, thinking of her mother and the uncertain roads she had traveled. The song began in a minor key, the guitar's notes resonating softly before her voice joined in, carrying the hush of heartbreak and the flicker of hope. Every word came steeped in the reality of her life. Moments of desperation, glimpses of kindness. The second verse swelled with a quiet determination that seemed to anchor every heart in the theater. By the time she reached the chorus, her voice had found a confident, soaring tone that stilled the crowd. When Lucia finished, there was a momentary silence, just like her first performance at the restaurant, before an eruption of applause. Some audience members rose from their seats in a standing ovation. Under the hot stage lights, Lucia's eyes glistened. She could barely breathe, astonished at how her story, her voice, had touched complete strangers. Backstage, Daniel was grinning from ear to ear. Tomas wiped away a stray tear he didn't realize had escaped. And Maria, pressing a trembling hand to her heart, mouthed the words, "Te amo," to her daughter, who caught her eye from the stage. Within days, word of Lucia's performance rippled through Granada's music circles and spread to a wider net of industry professionals. Daniel's phone buzzed incessantly with inquiries, some from local record labels, others from more established studios beyond the region. He juggled the possibilities, determined to protect Lucia's interests rather than let her be swept up in overwhelming promises. Meanwhile, at Las Estrellas del Alba, business was booming. The one-night-a-week performance by Lucia drew in new clientele, and the restaurant's original charm, classic Andalusian dishes, live guitar, candlelit ambience, still shone through. Señor Felipe walked a fine line between pride in the increased profits and frustration at the loss of his strictly formal atmosphere. Yet, day by day, even he seemed to thaw. One afternoon, Lucia walked into the restaurant for a sound check. She found Felipe polishing glasses at the bar. He glanced up, offered a curt nod, and returned to his work, but not before saying, "Don't be late tonight. The place is fully booked." It wasn't much, but for Felipe, it was practically a bouquet of roses. Tomas was setting up extra chairs around the stage area. He waved her over. "Guess what?" he said, eyes lit with excitement. "We've got tourists coming by specifically because they heard about you. Apparently, a travel blog recommended your soulful flamenco-infused ballads, whatever that means." Lucia giggled. "I'm not really a flamenco singer," she said bashfully. "But I'm happy people are coming. Feels like I'm giving something back." Truthfully, though, Lucia was torn. Daniel had informed her of a contract offer that included the production of an album and the possibility of traveling to larger cities, or even abroad. That meant leaving Granada for an extended period and possibly letting go of her weekly performances at Las Estrellas del Alba. She hadn't mustered the courage to bring it up with Tomas or Felipe yet. That night she delivered another mesmerizing performance. Tables were packed, and the applause came in waves. Once the last patron had left, Lucia lingered by the vacant stage, running her fingers lightly over the guitar strings. Tomas approached, carrying a spare bottle of water. "You were incredible," he said in a low voice. Even Felipe looked impressed. She exhaled. "Tomas, there's something I need to tell you." Stepping down from the stage, she confessed the dilemma about the contract offer. "Daniel says it's a golden opportunity. But I'd have to leave for months, maybe longer. I'd be on my own, touring different places, recording. I'm scared." Tomas listened carefully, his face a mixture of pride and sadness. "I knew this day would come, Lucia. Your talent isn't meant to stay in one corner of the world, even a corner as nice as this." He paused, swirling the water in its bottle. "I'll miss you. We all will. But I'd be lying if I said you shouldn't go. You belong on bigger stages." Tears stung her eyes. She set the guitar aside and hugged him. "I'm not sure I know who I am without this place," she murmured into his shoulder. He patted her back gently. "You'll always be Lucia from Granada, who won hearts with her first song in this old restaurant. Nothing changes that." When Daniel arranged a meeting for Lucia at the offices of a prominent record label in the city, Maria accompanied them. The label executives offered a contract that spelled out a year-long commitment, recording an album, promotional tours across Spain, possibly extended to other European cities. They promised lodging, a per diem for meals, and even a small advance. It was more money than Lucia had ever seen. Her mother's eyes brimmed with emotion and concern as they scanned the page. Daniel, trying to ensure no hidden traps lurked, explained every clause patiently. Finally, they reached the section about scheduling. Lucia would need to be on the road for significant chunks of time. The label reps smiled in a well-rehearsed manner. "We believe Lucia's voice is marketable across multiple demographics. With the right guidance, she could become a continental success." Maria set the pages down, anxiety etched on her face. "Lucia Carreno, this is a big decision." Lucia's heart pounded. She thought of the night singing in freezing alleyways, her hands numb. Then she remembered the applause, the meaningful stares of people she'd moved with her songs. She recognized she was on the brink of something enormous. Yet the fear of forgetting her roots, of losing the warmth of the restaurant, of Tomas's unwavering support, gnawed at her. She looked at Daniel, who nodded as if to say he'd back her no matter what. Finally, she lifted her gaze to the executives. "I'm willing to sign," she said, voice trembling. "But I have one condition." The reps raised their eyebrows. "Which is?" Lucia swallowed. "I need to do my first big show at Las Estrellas del Alba, where this all began. And I want to dedicate it to the people who believed in me before anyone else did." A hush followed. Then the execs exchanged glances. One shrugged. "That can be arranged," he said smoothly. "A launch event at your local venue, yes?" Lucia bristled at his patronizing tone, but Daniel placed a hand on her arm, gently urging her not to argue. After a tense pause, the rep added with forced politeness, "Of course. If it's meaningful to you, we'll coordinate something special." The day of the grand show at Las Estrellas del Alba arrived, turning the old stone building into the brightest beacon in the neighborhood. A small makeshift stage, expanded from the corner space Lucia once used, was adorned with fresh flowers, twinkling lights, and a modest sound system purchased with label funds. Word had spread. Locals, tourists, even a few journalists had gathered to witness the night Lucia officially launched her career under contract. Señor Felipe, impeccably dressed, greeted guests at the door with a stiff formality. Yet those who knew him well spotted the excitement flickering in his eyes. He circled the restaurant, ensuring waiters refilled wine glasses promptly and that the lighting highlighted the newly arranged decor. Business had never been better, and for once, Felipe seemed relaxed enough to enjoy it. Backstage, really just a storeroom hastily converted with curtains and warm lamps, Lucia paced. She wore a simple but elegant red dress, a small flower pinned in her hair, symbolizing Granada's heritage. Her guitar, newly gifted by the record label, shone with varnished wood, but she clutched it as though it were the same beat-up instrument from before. Maria hovered, straightening a stray lock of her daughter's hair. Daniel flipped through the setlist on a clipboard, wearing a proud smile. Tomas, wearing the server's uniform, popped his head through the curtain. "Lucia, the place is jam-packed. People are standing outside to catch even a glimpse." Lucia's stomach churned with anticipation. "I feel like I'm dreaming," she whispered. Her mother squeezed her shoulders. Daniel raised a hand, motioning to the microphone on the other side of the curtain. "Showtime." When Lucia stepped onto the small stage, the applause rattled the very walls. Every chair was filled, and a camera crew from a local station had set up near the bar. Tomas could be seen, craning his neck over a throng of people, giving her a beaming grin. Señor Felipe stood near the entrance with folded arms, looking strangely emotional. Lucia inhaled slowly. She touched the strings of her guitar, willed her heart to steady. "Buenas noches," she said gently into the microphone, scanning the sea of expectant faces. "Thank you for being here at Las Estrellas del Alba, a place that gave me shelter and believed in my music when I was just a hungry girl with a broken guitar." A hush fell over the crowd, and she began her first song, a new piece that interwove the rhythms of traditional flamenco with the contemporary ballad style she'd been developing under Daniel's guidance. The air crackled with the energy of her performance. Each lyric recounted snapshots of her past, the uncertainty of the alley, the blossoming hope in the restaurant, and the mother she longed for. The audience was spellbound, many dabbed tears from their eyes. By the final note, the applause and cheers were deafening. Amid the flowers and applause, Lucia caught Tomas's gaze. He mouthed something that looked like, "We're so proud of you." Her mother reached for her hand, and the two took a small bow together, an image captured by cameras that would soon appear in local news segments. That night, Lucia truly felt she had found not just success but also a sense of belonging. Leaving Granada for the broader tour was bittersweet. Daniel arranged a schedule that took Lucia first to Barcelona, where she performed in a trendy rooftop lounge overlooking the sparkling city lights. Then they traveled to Lisbon, set against pastel-colored buildings and the distant sound of fado. She even made her way to a cozy jazz bar in Paris, where passers-by paused to listen from the street. Everywhere she went, audiences were moved by her authenticity. Language barriers dissolved when she sang about longing and resilience. The year passed in a whirlwind of nights in new cities, photo shoots, interviews, and the thrill of stepping onto bigger and more elaborate stages. She was no longer just Lucia, the street kid from Granada. In the eyes of her fans, she was a rising star with a mesmerizing voice. Yet whenever she paused, she would text Tomas or call her mother, longing for the familiar hum of restaurant chatter and the smell of saffron and olive oil drifting from the kitchen. She missed hearing Felipe scold the staff for tardiness. Oddly enough, those were the details that made her feel grounded. In London, after a rousing performance, Daniel rushed backstage with a beaming face. "Lucia, you won't believe this. An international label wants you on a world stage next year. It might mean a more extensive tour, but the financial and career opportunities are huge." She felt her heart flutter with conflicting emotions. Could she handle more traveling, more distance from the place she considered home? She owed her career to the opportunities Daniel had helped foster, but she also missed the simpler days of singing in a small corner of Las Estrellas del Alba. "That's incredible," she managed, voice hushed. Daniel, reading her expression, placed a hand on her shoulder. "You can think it over, of course. But let me just say, your gift is meant to be shared, Lucia." She wondered if the world would ever feel as welcoming as that first audience in the restaurant. After another 6 months of traveling, Lucia decided she needed a real break, a chance to breathe, to reconnect with her roots. She informed Daniel she would take a short hiatus from official shows. Though some industry folks grumbled about lost momentum, she recognized the importance of remaining true to herself. Otherwise, she risked burning out or forgetting why she had started singing in the first place. Returning to Granada felt like stepping back into a cherished memory. She made her way through the narrow streets, pulling a small suitcase behind her. The winter chill in the air brought her back to that first night she met Tomas. When she pushed open the doors of Las Estrellas del Alba, the warmth and comforting buzz enveloped her. The place looked just as it had in her last performance there, albeit with a few extra decorative flourishes. Patrons at nearby tables recognized her instantly. A small flurry of excited whispers spread throughout the dining room. "Lucia!" Tomas called out from across the room. He had been balancing a tray of steaming plates, and now he abandoned them on a safe corner of the bar to rush over. She beamed when he hugged her, forgetting for a moment all the fancy stages she'd been on. Felipe, wiping a glass behind the bar, caught her eye and gave a stiff nod of welcome, along with something that could almost pass for a smile. "Thanks," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I needed to come home." That evening, once the restaurant quieted down, Lucia settled onto the familiar little stage. No major sound system, no glossy posters, just a battered stool and warm light from the overhead lanterns. Tomas and a few regulars gathered around, a subdued hush filling the space. She sang an impromptu set of a few new songs she'd written, mixed with her old tunes. Each chord reverberated off the stone walls, and with each lyric, she remembered how safe she had felt singing here the first time. Her mother, who had come to the restaurant later that night, watched with misty eyes. Even Felipe hung by the bar, silently listening, his face softening at the edges. After she finished, Tomas approached, tears glinting in his eyes. "You haven't lost that spark, you know," he said. She exhaled, wiping her own tears. "I was worried maybe I had." Maria joined them, pulling both Lucia and Tomas into a tight hug. Over the top of their heads, she told her daughter, "You could sing on the biggest stage in the world, or in this small corner, and I'd be just as proud." A short while later, Lucia decided she would continue to grow her career but also give back. Having tasted life without a home, she launched a small organization to support young people in Granada who had artistic talent but no means to develop it. She named it Voces de Esperanza, Voices of Hope, dedicating it to everyone who ever felt unseen. "I want to be for others what Tomas and Daniel have been for me," Lucia explained in a local TV interview. She also openly praised Senor Felipe for the second chance he grudgingly offered her, though she joked that he still threatened to fire Tomas weekly for minor mishaps. Las Estrellas del Alba thus became more than just a restaurant. It became a local landmark, a symbol of a dream begun in a narrow alley on a cold winter night. Tourists now visited not only to taste Felipe's traditional Andalusian dishes but also to see the place where Lucia performed her earliest songs. A framed photo of her hung near the entrance, capturing the moment she'd bowed on that first special night. Tomas, who had become Felipe's unofficial partner in managing the front of house, organized occasional community events. They sometimes invited up-and-coming singers from Lucia's program to have a chance on the same corner stage. The crowd often included people from all walks of life, clapping along, recalling how Lucia's story started. Daniel, who was busier than ever managing Lucia's career, visited frequently. He marveled at the changes. "I've never seen a restaurant become so famous, yet still feel like the cozy place it was before. You've pulled off something unique," he told Tomas one evening. Tomas just grinned, proud of what they had all built together. Years rolled by, marked by new albums, tours, and Lucia's steady climb in the music world. From time to time, she made it a point to return to Granada. Once, while preparing for a major overseas festival, she decided to record a live album, a stripped-down acoustic session that reflected her roots. She surprised everyone by choosing Las Estrellas del Alba as her recording venue. Equipment cases, microphones, and cables filled the cozy interior. Felipe had to temporarily close the restaurant to patrons for the day, and although he grumbled about the business he might lose, his eyes gleamed with anticipation. Tomas supervised the setup, ensuring no wires were a tripping hazard for the staff. Maria, carrying trays of snacks for the crew, kept everyone nourished with homemade pastries. When Lucia sat down on the small stage for sound checks, the hush in the restaurant felt electric. She would be sharing the same corner that once held her battered guitar and trembling voice, only now with professional recording gear capturing every note. The evening session began, and she recorded a series of songs, some older, some brand new. Between takes, she addressed a small crowd of friends, family, and essential staff, reminiscing about her journey. She dedicated one track to "the man who gave me a chance even if he didn't realize it at first, Felipe." Another to Tomas, "my first real friend," and one especially to her mother, "the woman whose love carried me, even from a distance." By the end of the recording, tears flowed freely among those present, though no one was ashamed to show them. The album, when it released, soared to popularity, but for Lucia, its true value was intangible. It captured the spirit of the place that taught her she wasn't just a street child, but an artist with a gift to share. On the 5-year anniversary of her first performance at Las Estrellas del Alba, Lucia organized a celebratory event open to the neighborhood. Flyers depicting a then and now photo of her, ragged coat by the alley, contrasted with her radiant stage presence, circulated throughout Granada. The restaurant decked the walls with photos chronicling Lucia's rise, while ribbons and soft fairy lights dangled from the rafters. Every table was booked weeks in advance. The crowd that gathered included people from all stages of her life, older customers who remembered the shy girl with the battered guitar, new fans who had only heard of her fame, local press, and even a few curious souls from other cities. Cameras flashed as a hush fell, and Lucia took the stage in a simple outfit that recalled her humble beginnings rather than her glamorous tour costumes. "Good evening," she greeted, voice resonant with warmth. "Tonight isn't about me. It's about gratitude. Gratitude for everyone who believed in me, everyone who took a risk, sometimes at the cost of their own security, to help a young girl who had nothing but a dream." She performed a setlist that blended her earliest compositions, songs from her albums, and one new track she had written specifically for the anniversary. Each chord resonated with the memory of footsteps echoing in that back alley, each lyric heavy with the weight of what she'd overcome. When the final melody faded, the applause was thunderous. Tomas stepped forward, carrying a single red rose. He handed it to her, then faced the audience. "To Lucia," he said, "who reminds us that every life deserves a chance. And to this restaurant," he grinned, "which gave us the perfect stage to see a star born." Señor Felipe even cleared his throat, raising a glass of wine. "I may not be great with words," he said, "but I can say this. I've never been prouder to have had a hand in helping someone reach their destiny. Lucia, her eyes wet, lifted her own glass in return. We don't walk these roads alone. We never do. Later that night, with the event winding down, Lucia found a quiet spot near the kitchen. She leaned against the old stone wall, eyes drifting to the little corner where she once performed for a plate of food. Her mother's laughter and Tomasa's voice mingled with the gentle jingle of silverware and plates in the background. She closed her eyes, letting the moment sink in. Daniel approached, giving her a gentle smile. They're asking if you might come back for another tour, maybe early this time. Lucia laughed softly. You never stop, do you? Then she looked around at the place that had anchored her through every twist of fate. We can talk about it tomorrow. Right now, I just want to be here. Daniel nodded in understanding. You deserve to enjoy this moment. That night, as the last guests departed and the staff began to tidy up, Lucia sat with her guitar in the empty dining room. The hush felt comforting. She plucked at the strings, playing a quiet improvisation that spoke only to her, a prayer of thanks and promise. Above the bar, a photograph captured that very first moment she sang in Las Estrellas del Alba, a wide-eyed girl in ragged clothes, uncertain of her next meal. Next to it hung a more recent photo from her international tour, her eyes shining with confidence. Those two images side by side told a story of resilience, generosity, and boundless possibility. Lucia. Tomasa's voice gently broke her reverie. We're closing soon. She glanced at him, smiling. I'll be right there. Tomas nodded, content to see she was at peace. Before leaving, he added quietly, Hey, never forget, this will always be home for you. A wave of warmth coursed through Lucia. I know, she said, her voice almost trembling with affection. I'll always come back. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel to never miss other heartwarming stories like this.